This was a grant. Trout Unlimited was approached to help out in Hangman Creek to support the red band trout in here. And they stepped up and funded the purchase of all these plants, and now they're out here volunteering and putting them in the ground. Trout Unlimited is a nonprofit organization. This chapter is based out of Spokane and mainly work in the Spokane watershed. What do you guys got? Oh, aspen?
Yeah. Keep them up here?
Yeah, keep them up top and try to find some lower depressions and set them in.
I'm Harvey Morrison. I'm with the Spokane Falls chapter, Trout Unlimited. And we're up here planting all these trees, hoping to reestablish the floodplain of the creek. Down in the Spokane area, the biggest problem in the Spokane River is the flood that comes out of Hangman Creek and all the sediments and silt and mud and chemicals that come with it. So if we can slow that flow down and hold some of that water up here in the headwaters, I can't believe it's not going to be helpful to the Spokane River. So we're planting up here, and hopefully we'll plant on all the way down through the whole watershed, and eventually we'll solve this big problem that we have.
I think maybe 8 years ago I met some of the members of Trout Unlimited down in Spokane at Earth Day. And their whole theme is save the red bands, and so then they heard we're working on strictly red bands up here, so it seemed like a natural partnership. And I've come to know them as a small but highly energized group, and for them to come up, leave their home state and do some work over here in Idaho is pretty significant. It's a hard-working group, and really appreciate Bill Abrahams, working with me on the grant to pay for all these plant materials, and we've supplied plant protection and heavy equipment and all the fencing that you see. That was all supplied by the Coeur d'Alene tribe as a matching fund for that. So it's a partnership that we started a few years ago, and this is a pretty significant step toward increasing that connection between Trout Unlimited and the Coeur d'Alene tribe.
It is the fall, great time to plant. It's also the time when the beaver are most active as they're trying to get what they can and store for food in their caches for the winter. And so we have to be really vigilant on protecting these trees once they go in the ground. It doesn't take long for them to come out and sniff out what we put in the ground and snap them off at the base, basically. But yeah, not all is lost. We'll try to do what we can to protect them. But
you can see there's alder everywhere, but it's the cottonwood and the quake and aspen must be like his candy or whatever. He's hooked.
Beaver, deer, elk, moose, they all are targeting willow, aspen, and cottonwood. And that's exactly what we're trying to get established, because that's beaver food, and they don't really prefer the alder. So that's really the only thing that is already out here. A stake or two and just wrapping these around the tree, and so that'll keep the beaver out. And these are 5-gallon pots, so we're hoping some of them are getting to the point where they'll be above the head of an elk. So that's the key point, is getting them up above elk. So we've tried buying 1-gallon and 2-gallon pots, and it's a lot cheaper, but they just don't work because they get chewed down right to the top of the green protection cones, and then they just stay alive, but they will never get above the cone. So we've had some success with using chicken wire and getting really tall trees.
Hangman is notorious for sediment transport and high water temperatures. And if we can help curb that sediment transport, that ultimately goes into the Spokane River and just decreases water quality for that whole Spokane River and then downstream. You can see that defined line of muddy water moving into the Spokane River where Hangman Creek dumps in. During flood events, Hangman Creek can really push a lot of water, especially near the mouth. And you get 20,000 CFS of sediment-laden water moving into the Spokane River. It can really affect issues just downstream of that. So
It's, as I recall, we're about probably 60, 70 miles from the where the confluence of the Spokane is. This is the best place to start. Rather than starting at the low end, we start at the top end. And the best habitat that the creek has is in these hills around here. And if we can just slow down the melt, so when it gets to the farm ground down below, that it doesn't erode the fields as much as it has been over the last 100 years.
And the way this watershed is sitting in the in this valley, it's all fairly low elevation. Rain on snow is really common, and because of that, we have these really flashy runoff events. It all comes down at once, and that's historically even that was common in the Hangman drainage. But the floodplain and the stream were intact enough that it could buffer the effects of that. If you can imagine, when it's flooding in here, this is where all the water is going to be. It's not going to be out on the floodplain. We get huge flood events, and it's all contained in the channel, and now you've got all this power in the channel moving down, all confined in the channel, and it leads to issues like this. Raw vertical banks that you can't get vegetation established on until you try to fix the disconnect between the floodplain and the stream. In the past, we've come into areas like this and we put what's called an erosion bank pin in. It's a pin we pound horizontally into the banks to measure how much bank we lose in a year. A lot of times those pins we put in are 2 to 3 feet long, and that much bank sloughs off in 1 year and our pin is gone. And we can't even, it's hard to measure erosion when you're losing feet of bank a year. And you can imagine, I mean, this is just one short section we're doing it, but it's compounded all the way down Hangman Creek. And it's carrying that much sediment, that many tons of sediment are moving down this watershed and exiting into the Spokane River. As long as you have all this ripping power moving through the stream channel, we can't physically come in here and try to repair these banks. So upstream of here, where we were planting directly upstream, that floodplain is pretty well intact, able to try to get plants established within that riparian zone. But down here, and Grant, we're not very far from that restoration work we were doing upstream. We're only a couple kilometers downstream, and there isn't that much more water input into the system here. There isn't that many more tributaries dumping in. It's just all that flood water is now confined into the channel in this reach.